go ahead, yeah.
Yeah. This started when I began to think about my early impressions when I came from Britain to Canada in 1956. And we moved to Ottawa. And I was not familiar with rough camping or hunting or friends with grandparents' farms. And everywhere, every home I went into, I would see these flying geese or ducks going up their wall in plaster. And I was thinking about the landscapes that I saw that were so different from the landscapes I had been growing up with. So this is my homage to that. And I also thought, well, we see nature through a certain lens, through a certain way, but is that how nature observes itself? These geese, how they're clothing themselves? We see them as these very dull, neutral colors, but perhaps inside they have some inside of them that loves display. So these are all done in the computer. I start out with a blank canvas, and the painting essentially grows itself. I never know what the outcome is going to be. So in this one, I thought about the energy, the unseen energies that are all around us, and that's why I brought all this detail into the foreground and this radiant sky bursting out of this grove of trees. And this one, there's your ubiquitous fish leaping from the lake and your foliage, and again, it's dressed, it's celebratory, and very vibrant. When I work in the computer, I use very vibrant colors.
I can see that.
Yeah, and I'm always surprised that when you start to play with forms, this began as actually a mandala I had done, and I just began to stretch it and warp it, eventually got this pattern, and I thought, wow, that's interesting because it really makes me feel about the indigenous shapes in art that are used.
And the West Coast here.
Exactly, and I thought, okay, interesting. Everything we see, we internalize. And it's all in there generating, and then it comes up to the consciousness when we put it out. And so I thought, okay, what can I do with it? Well, it's, again, let's honor the water and the reflections in the water. So that's what this one is. And then after I had it printed, these are all done on wood panel. I went back in and did some brushwork just to give it.
Yeah, yes, I noticed that.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the, what do you call it, the pearlescent or?
Yeah. Yeah, because I like you to come to the painting, and depending on your angle and the way the light's going to reflect, you'll get a different sense. And this one, these two wonderful swans and the little buoyant trees, the big starry sky. And here again, I've repeated the flying geese coming out of the woods, and as they emerge, their true colors emerge from their camouflage. This one is very different. This one, it's almost, it's very technical looking. And it made me think of computer boards and technical patterns, but also of the staff Klimt because of these patterns. And I was thinking, it's interesting in our brain, we keep creating these patterns. There must be something inside of us. And then I just introduced the spheres. And then, oh, here come our geese again. So with these digital paintings, it's all a very tight approach. It's hand-drawn, it's intense. But the beauty of working in the computer is I can, say, draw a shape, like this little tree, and then you can take it and repeat it, and you can take it into another element, and you can elongate it, stretch it, warp it, and it cuts back a lot of time, which at this stage of life is a wonderful thing to be able to do, to cut to the chase and create the image without putting in hours and hours and hours. You still do put in hours, but it doesn't stretch into months, which if you try to do something like this by hand, it certainly would. Well, the interesting thing is that the hand is only involved to do large gestural sweeps with the paint. I paint these flat, and I use very liquid paints. I dilute them with medium or with water, and everything is done at once, and it's done very, very quickly.
You have large pots of paint at your disposal?
I pull out all the colors that I feel drawn to in that moment because I don't know what I'm going to do yet.
Okay.
And I sort of put them around me, and then I start And I have a table set up outside that I can move around. And then I can do these great swoops. And I actually don't use a brush because a brush tends to go back into the habit of the hand and the eye to want to start picking away at things.
Oh,
And
okay.
I don't want to do that. I want the paint to speak. I want it to reveal what it's going to do. And that's why you get these wonderful kinds of things happening. All these little details and splashes. And then
So are you using a squeegee or?
No.
No, you're not using a brush,
I'm
but.
not using a brush, I'm using big pieces of cardboard.
Ah.
The flat edge.
Okay.
So I can swoop it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Swoop it and spread it and mix it.
that's right.
Wow.
A little bit like magic. And then both this one and this one here are painted on large wood panels, generally given to me by a friend. And this one is completely different because, as I say, I don't know when I start. And after I had done the big swooping, I had this desire to start putting these little spheres in there. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Now, where has my unconscious picked that up? And it's a referral back to a photograph I took of two of my kids down at Grassy Point. And when I developed it, they were surrounded by these little orbs of light just everywhere. It was a very windy, stormy day. Now, I don't know where they come from. They're not light reflections, but I thought interesting. But it also represents to me things like atoms and the molecular parts that we're made of. And light. You know, you've got all this darkness, but here you've got this wonderful floating little energies. This particular piece is a response to a film on YouTube that I watched about the island of garbage in the middle of the Pacific.
Oh my goodness.
And all the terrible things that are happening to the birds that are eating it. And I just wept.
And the whales and the turtles and.
And what we are doing to our seas. So you can see the image of the fish, but there's all these things floating around it.
Gosh, I didn't notice that quite before.
Yeah. But again, I put the little circles in. That's my little element of hope that we can regenerate, we can rebuild. We just have to become aware.
And they're in this next painting as
They're
well.
in this next painting as well. Yeah. And this, again, is the idea of the immense cosmos reflecting down onto, it could be a lake, it could be a piece of water, or just looking up into the sky, the vastness of it.
I love this sky in this next one. This one is a phenomenal horizon and sky.
Yes, yeah, this one was trickier to do. Again, because I'm using different types of paint, so sometimes you can pull it off and get these wonderful kinds of reactions, and other times you can get mud. But there's some beautiful things happening down
There's some beautiful
here.
mud down there.
Yeah, well, it's a light touch,
Yeah.
and it's knowing when to back off.
Yes,
When to allow
just-
the
yeah.
medium
Yes.
to, as I say, express itself and not to interfere with the process.
And it's fascinating to explore that once it's done, just with your eyes and your mind. Yeah.
And I'm always surprised because, don't forget, I paint flat, and I don't know until it's dried and I lift it up and
Yes.
say, that's what this is.
Yeah.
And this is referring back to other reflections of Canada. I've been up north, and after I did this one, I thought, oh, that is so much like the colors that we see in the north. And that big sky.
The mountains, yeah.
Yeah.
And here we have your tree. You've worked on the tree theme quite a lot over the years too.
I have a deep, deep respect for the trees. And as we find out more about their interconnectedness and their intelligence, you know,
I've been reading about that.
Yeah. And the importance of the mushroom culture, that as their roots are reaching out to speak to each other, to warn one another. This particular piece is, again, it's a windswept day, there's a storm going on, and here's these two trees just stand firm in all of that.
And they give us oxygen.
Yes. They feed us.
They do.
And yes, they've been
That's
around for a
beautiful.
long, long time.
What's that?
These are just little, very, very fast color studies. Again, you lay down the paint, you walk away, and you come and see what has emerged.
Mhm.
This one, I'm exploring the idea of what lies beneath. I have my horizon line, but I have my entrance into a deeper place. And all the textures, I use little glass beads to bring in some textures to reflect some light back. And I started to feel a compulsion to begin to draw back in to the painting, to start to bring the hand into the work.
Mhm.
And I've really expanded on that idea with this one, where I've gone back in and it's little lines that I just feel are so important to begin to define these little areas. Again, quickly done, don't know what I'm going to get, but then to go back in and say, oh, isn't that interesting? I've got some trees and what looks like a bluff, but these trees need to have a little life given to them.
Mhm.
And you can see I use a lot of iridescent colors. Again, I studied under a Russian iconographer, so the element of gold is very important.
And the crackling as well gives it
Yeah.
a sense of age
That's right.
and also just sort of a sense that you're looking into what is in this bluff. Almost like microscopic details about Earth and microorganisms and the geological history of it somehow. That's what I get out of it anyway.
Yeah, and if I look at it from another place, I can say, well, it's almost like breaking the veil and the illusion of what do we think is real, and behind that is this wonderful, incredible life force, this light, and no matter how dark things appear, the little specks of light, to me, it's hopeful. That's important in my work, to give an element of hope. Sometimes the read is very dark, but there will always be somewhere in the painting that light. And the other thing about when you use metallics and iridescence, again, if you shift your viewpoint, you're going to see a different way of looking at things. And isn't that what life is like? We shape our belief systems on the influences that come from the things around us. How do we perceive the object?
Wonderful. We've come to another marvelous large canvas that you created. When did you do this one? Was that this year?
Well, to be honest, this is the third painting on this canvas.
Oh.
Because one thing I'm not afraid to do is paint things over if I'm not completely satisfied.
Ah.
So this is its third iteration, and I completed it about 3 months ago. And again, painting flat, discovering what has emerged after I put it up, and I was thinking, oh, isn't that interesting? That's like our west coast of Vancouver Island. That's the storm out at sea. That's
Yes.
everything being tossed around. So it's almost like the image wants to appear and say its piece, reflect us back to us.
Yeah, storm watching on the west coast in winter. How's that for a title?
That would do it. Yeah, it's 4 feet by 5 feet. I think that's the largest I've ever painted, because that's as big as I can get into my vehicle. So